The dust kicked up behind Zara Fitzgerald's worn boots as she ran through the streets of Greeley, Colorado, clutching nothing but a threadbare shawl and the clothes on her back, knowing her stepfather would kill her if he caught her this time. It was the summer of 1878, and the town was bustling with cattlemen and railroad workers, none of whom paid any mind to a frightened 20-year-old woman darting between buildings like a spooked rabbit. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, streaming behind her as she ran, and her chest burned with the effort of breathing in the dry Colorado air. She had finally done it. She had finally escaped the nightmare that had been her life since her mother died 2 years ago, leaving her alone with a man who drank away every cent and raised his fists whenever the whiskey told him to. Zara ducked into an alley between the general store and the blacksmith shop, pressing her back against the rough wooden wall and trying to catch her breath. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She could hear her stepfather's voice in the distance, slurred and angry, calling her name like a curse. She squeezed her eyes shut and prayed to a God she was not sure was listening anymore. "You look like you could use some help." Her eyes flew open. A man stood at the mouth of the alley, backlit by the afternoon sun, so she could not make out his features clearly. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a cowboy hat that had seen better days. His voice was low and calm, the kind of voice that did not startle horses or make dogs bark. "I am fine," Zara lied, her voice shaking. She pressed herself harder against the wall, ready to run again if she had to. The man took a step closer, and she could see him better now. He had sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water after a storm, gray-green and steady. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark stubble along his jaw and dust coating his worn denim pants. There was a gentleness in his face that seemed out of place in this rough town. "No, you are not," he said simply. "And that man looking for you does not seem like someone you want to find you." Zara's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to tell this stranger to mind his own business, but the words would not come. Instead, tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and she hated herself for the weakness. The cowboy looked over his shoulder, then back at her. "Come with me. I have got a horse tied up at the livery. We can be gone before he finds this alley." "I do not know you," Zara managed to say, though every instinct screamed at her to trust him. "Name is James Barrett. I work the cattle ranches north of here. I am heading back that way today." He held out his hand, palm up, like he was offering something precious instead of just his calloused fingers. "I give you my word I will not hurt you. I will get you somewhere safe." "Your word?" Zara almost laughed, except nothing was funny. "I do not even know you." "Why would your word mean anything?" James Barrett met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made her breath catch. "Because it is all I have got to give right now, but I mean it with everything I am." Zara heard her stepfather's voice getting closer, heard him asking people if they had seen her. In that moment, she made a choice that would change everything. She pushed off from the wall and took James Barrett's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he pulled her forward. "Stay close to me," he said, and led her out of the alley in the opposite direction from where her stepfather's voice was coming. They moved quickly, but not so fast as to draw attention, weaving through the afternoon crowd until they reached the livery stable at the edge of town. James's horse was a tall bay gelding with kind eyes and a white star on his forehead. "This is Copper," James said, untying the reins. "He is steady. He will not spook." "Where are you taking me?" Zara asked, reality starting to settle in. She had just left with a complete stranger. She had nothing, no money, no plan, no future that she could see. "There is a ranch about 15 miles north. The owner is a good woman named Dorothy Jensen. She is always looking for help with the house and the cooking. I work for her, tending the cattle." James swung up into the saddle with practiced ease, then reached down for Zara. "Can you ride?" "Not well," Zara admitted. "You will ride with me then." He pulled her up behind him as if she weighed nothing, and she had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from falling. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, could smell leather and sweat and something like sage. James urged Copper forward, and they left Greeley behind at a steady trot. Zara looked back once, half expecting to see her stepfather charging after them, but there was only dust and distance. She turned her face forward and held on tighter. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape opening up around them in vast stretches of prairie grass and distant mountains. The sky was enormous out here, bigger than anything Zara had ever seen, blue and endless. She had lived in Greeley all her life, had never been more than a few miles from town. This felt like stepping into a different world. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible over the sound of hoofbeats. James was quiet for a moment. "I had a sister once," he said. "She was in a bad situation and nobody helped her. By the time I was old enough to do something about it, it was too late. She died when I was 17. Zara felt her chest tighten. "I am sorry. I swore I would never stand by and watch someone suffer if I could do something to stop it." He glanced back at her, just a quick look over his shoulder. "I know you do not have any reason to trust me, but I meant what I said. I will keep you safe." "Your word is enough," Zara said, and she meant it. There was something about this man, this stranger who had appeared in her darkest moment like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak. She believed him. They reached the Jensen Ranch as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The ranch was bigger than Zara had expected, with a large main house, a barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where cattle grazed. It looked prosperous and well kept, the kind of place that spoke of hard work and good management. A woman emerged from the main house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and sharp eyes that took in everything at once. This had to be Dorothy Jensen. James dismounted and helped Zara down. Her legs were shaky from the ride, and she stumbled a little. James steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "James Barrett," Dorothy said, her voice carrying across the yard. "Who is this you have brought to my doorstep?" "Miss Zara Fitzgerald," James said. "She needed help. I told her you might have work for her." Dorothy's sharp eyes swept over Zara, taking in her disheveled appearance, her lack of belongings, the fear that was probably still visible in her face. But there was no judgment in Dorothy's expression, only assessment. "Can you cook?" Dorothy asked. "Yes, madam," Zara said, straightening her spine. "I can cook and clean and mend. I can work hard." "Can you get up before dawn and work until after dark?" "Yes, madam." Dorothy studied her for another long moment, then nodded. "I will give you a month's trial. Room and board plus $2 a week. If you work out, we will talk about permanent wages. If you are running from the law, you can turn around right now." "I am not," Zara said quickly. "I am running from my stepfather. He drinks. He gets violent." Something flickered in Dorothy's eyes. "I see. Well, you will be safe here. Any man who comes looking for trouble on my land will find more than he bargained for." She gestured toward the house. "Come inside. James, take care of your horse and then see to the evening chores." "Yes, madam," James said. He caught Zara's eye and gave her a small nod, almost like reassurance, before leading Copper toward the barn. Zara followed Dorothy into the house, her heart still racing but hope beginning to kindle in her chest for the first time in years. The inside of the house was clean and practical, with sturdy furniture and bright curtains on the windows. It smelled like bread and coffee and wood smoke. Dorothy led her through the main room and down a short hallway to a small bedroom. "This will be yours," Dorothy said. "It is not fancy, but the bed is good and the roof does not leak. There is a wash basin and pitcher. Supper is at 6. Tomorrow morning breakfast is at 5. I will show you your duties then." "Thank you," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Jensen." "It is Miss Jensen," Dorothy corrected. "I never married, and you can thank me by working hard and keeping your word. I do not abide laziness or dishonesty." "I will not disappoint you," Zara promised. Dorothy's expression softened just slightly. "See that you do not. Now wash up and come to the kitchen in 20 minutes. You can help me finish supper." When Dorothy left, Zara sat down on the bed and let herself cry, but this time they were tears of relief rather than fear. She had escaped. She was safe. And it was all because a cowboy named James Barrett had offered her his hand and his word. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Zara rose before dawn each day to help Dorothy prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, then spent her days cooking, cleaning, mending, and learning the rhythm of ranch life. It was exhausting work, but it was honest work, and for the first time in years, she went to bed each night without fear. James Barrett was a constant presence on the ranch. He worked alongside the other cowboys, driving cattle, mending fences, breaking horses. Zara found herself watching for him, noticing when he came in for meals, listening for his voice among the others. He was quiet and steady, the kind of man who did what needed to be done without complaint or fanfare. The other ranch hands respected him, and she could see why. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had arrived, Zara was sitting on the porch steps snapping green beans when James came walking up from the barn. The sun was setting behind him, and his shadow stretched long across the yard. "Evening," he said, taking off his hat as he approached. "Evening," Zara replied, making room for him on the step. He sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him after a long day in the sun. "How are you settling in?" "Well," Zara said honestly, "Miss Jensen is fair, the work is hard, but I do not mind it." "She likes you," James said. "I heard her tell one of the hands that you were the best help she had ever hired." Zara felt a flush of pride. "I am trying." "You are doing more than trying." James stretched out his legs and leaned back on his elbows. "I am glad you are safe here." "Thank you," Zara said, turning to look at him. "I never properly thanked you for what you did. You saved my life that day." James met her eyes and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Zara's breath catch. "I would do it again," he said quietly, "in a heartbeat." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Zara snapping beans and James watching the sky change colors. It felt natural, sitting here with him. It felt right. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said after a while. "Anything. What made you become a cowboy? Did you always want this life?" James was quiet for a moment, considering. "My father was a farmer in Missouri. He wanted me to take over the farm when he got too old. But after my sister died, I could not stay there anymore. Too many memories. So I headed west, looking for something different. I found work on a ranch in Kansas, learned the trade and kept moving. Ended up here about 2 years ago." "Do you miss your family?" "Sometimes," James admitted. "My father passed last year. My mother died when I was young. There is no one left back there for me." He looked at her. "What about you? Any family besides your stepfather?" "No. My real father died when I was 10. My mother remarried when I was 16. She died 2 years ago, and that is when everything got bad." Zara set down the bowl of beans. "I have no one either." "That is not true," James said. "You have Dorothy. You have the people here. You have me." The way he said it, the sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Zara's chest. "Do I?" she asked softly. James reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her palm. "You do, for as long as you want." Zara looked down at their joined hands, at the way his rough skin contrasted with her own. "I want that," she whispered. "I want that very much." They stayed like that as the last light faded from the sky, holding hands on the porch steps. And Zara thought that maybe, just maybe, she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. Over the following weeks, Zara and James spent more and more time together. He would find excuses to come to the house during the day, offering to carry heavy loads or fix things that needed repairing. She would save him the best portions at meals, and their eyes would meet across the table in ways that made her heart race. Dorothy noticed, of course. The older woman did not miss much. One morning, as Zara was kneading bread dough in the kitchen, Dorothy came and stood beside her. "James Barrett is a good man," she said without preamble. Zara felt her cheeks heat. "Yes, madam, but he is also a cowboy. They do not make much money and the life is hard." "I know," Zara said, punching down the dough perhaps more forcefully than necessary. "Do you?" Dorothy's voice was not unkind, just matter of fact. "Because I see the way you look at each other, and I want you to go in with your eyes open. If you care for that man, you need to understand what you are signing up for." Zara stopped working the dough and turned to face Dorothy. "I have never had much, Miss Jensen. I know what hard times look like. I know what it is to go without. But I also know what it is to live in fear, and I know what it is to feel alone. James makes me feel safe. He makes me feel like I matter. That is worth more to me than money or an easy life." Dorothy studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good answer. Just wanted to make sure you were thinking with your head and not just your heart." "I am thinking with both," Zara assured her. "Then you have my blessing, for what it is worth." Dorothy picked up a dish towel and started wiping down the counter. "James asked me this morning if he could court you properly. Wanted to know if I thought it was appropriate, given that you work here and all. I told him to stop being a fool and just talk to you himself." Zara's heart leaped. "He asked you that?" "He did. That man is smitten with you, girl. Has been since the day he brought you here. I have known James for 2 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Zara tried to contain her smile and failed completely. She went back to kneading the bread, but her hands were shaking now, and not from the effort. James found her that evening after supper. She was feeding the chickens in the yard, scattering grain from a bucket while the hens clucked and pecked around her feet. He walked up slowly, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Zara," he said. "Can we talk?" She set down the bucket. "Of course." He gestured toward the path that led down to the creek. "Walk with me." They walked side by side in the gathering dusk, not touching but close enough that their arms almost brushed. The creek was running low this time of year, just a trickle over smooth stones, but the cottonwood trees that lined its banks provided shade and privacy. James stopped walking when they were out of sight of the house. He turned to face her, and Zara could see that he was genuinely nervous. It made her love him a little more, seeing this strong, capable man unsure of himself. "I have been thinking," he began, then stopped and shook his head. "No, that is not right. I have been feeling, and I need to tell you about it." "Okay," Zara said softly. "I know we have not known each other long, just over a month, but I cannot remember what my life was like before you were in it. Every day I wake up, and the first thing I think about is seeing you at breakfast. Every night I go to sleep thinking about the way you smiled at something one of the other hands said, or how you hummed while you were washing dishes, or the way the sunlight looked in your hair." Zara's throat was tight with emotion. "James, let me finish," he said. "Please, I need to say this." He took a deep breath. I do not have much. I've got a horse, a saddle, some clothes, and a little bit of money saved up. I make $30 a month plus room and board. That is not a lot. It is not enough to give you fancy dresses or a big house or any of the things you deserve." "I do not need those things," Zara interrupted. "But I can give you my word," James continued, his gray-green eyes locked on hers. "I can promise you that I will work hard every day to make a life for us. I can promise you that I will be faithful and true, that I will protect you and care for you and do everything in my power to make you happy. I can promise you that I will love you with everything I have, for as long as I draw breath." Tears were streaming down Zara's face now. "You are asking me to marry you. I am asking you to trust me, to take a chance on a cowboy who has nothing to offer but his word and his heart." James reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I know it is not much." "Your word is enough," Zara said, echoing what she had told him that first day. "Your word is everything." She rose up on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that kiss, all the hope and fear and love that had been building in her heart. James kissed her back like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and he was smiling in a way that transformed his whole face. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "Yes," Zara laughed. "Yes, yes, yes." "I will marry you, James Barrett." He picked her up and spun her around, and her laughter echoed off the creek banks. When he set her down, he was grinning like a kid at Christmas. "I will build you a house," he said. "It will take time, but I will do it. Miss Jensen said I could use some of the land on the east edge of the property. I have been saving my wages. We can start small, just a cabin at first, but I will make it good. I will make it a home." "We will make it a home," Zara corrected. "Together." They walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, and when Dorothy saw them coming, she took one look at their faces and smiled. "I expect you will be wanting time off for a wedding," she said dryly. "Yes, madam," James said. "If you can spare me, I suppose I can manage. When are you thinking?" James looked at Zara. "As soon as possible. There is a preacher who comes through town once a month," Dorothy said. "He will be here next week. That's soon enough for you too." "Perfect," Zara breathed. The week before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Zara worked on altering one of Dorothy's old dresses to fit her, taking in seams and adding lace that Dorothy had been saving for years. The other ranch hands teased James mercilessly, but also helped him clean up and pressed his best shirt for the occasion. Word spread through Greeley about the wedding, and Zara was both nervous and excited about going back to town. "What if my stepfather is there?" she asked James the night before the wedding. They were sitting on the porch again, their favorite spot. "Then I will deal with him," James said calmly. "But he has no claim on you, Zara. You are your own woman, and tomorrow you will be my wife. I will not let anyone hurt you or take you away." "Do you promise?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. James pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "I promise you with everything I am. That man will never lay a hand on you again. I will die before I let that happen." "Do not say that," Zara said, pressing her face against his chest. "Do not talk about dying, not now. You are right. I am sorry." He kissed the top of her head. "I should be talking about living, about our future. About the life we are going to build together." "Tell me about it," Zara said. "Tell me what you see when you think about our future." James was quiet for a moment, his hand rubbing slow circles on her back. "I see a little cabin with a garden out front. You grow vegetables and flowers, and the whole place smells like the bread you bake. I come home at the end of the day, and you are there waiting for me, and I think to myself that I am the luckiest man alive. Maybe we have children someday, if we are blessed. A couple of kids running around, learning to ride, helping with the chores. And when we are old, we sit on the porch together and watch the sunset, and we remember all the good years we had." Zara was crying again, but these were happy tears. "That sounds perfect." "It will be," James said. "I will make sure of it." The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Zara woke before the sun, too excited to sleep, and helped Dorothy prepare a special breakfast. Her stomach was too full of butterflies to eat much, but she forced herself to have some toast and coffee. Dorothy helped her dress, doing up the tiny buttons on the back of the altered gown and arranging her hair. "You look beautiful," the older woman said, her usually stern face soft with emotion. "Like a real bride." "I am a real bride," Zara said, and the truth of it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. They took the wagon into town, James driving while Dorothy and Zara sat in the back. Zara kept touching the simple gold ring James had bought for her, turning it over and over in her hands. It had cost him a month's wages, she knew, and it was the most precious thing she had ever owned. The church in Greeley was small and plain, with wooden pews and a simple cross on the wall. The preacher was there waiting, a thin man with kind eyes and a booming voice. Several of the ranch hands had come, dressed in their Sunday best, and a few townspeople had gathered out of curiosity. Zara scanned the crowd nervously, looking for her stepfather, but he was nowhere to be seen. Relief flooded through her. James was waiting at the front of the church, and when Zara walked down the aisle on Dorothy's arm, the look on his face made her forget everything else. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, like she was something miraculous. The ceremony was short and simple. They exchanged vows and rings, and when the preacher said James could kiss his bride, James cupped her face in his hands the way he had down by the creek and kissed her softly, reverently, like a promise. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," she whispered back. They walked out of the church as husband and wife, into the bright Colorado sunshine, and Zara had never felt so happy in her entire life. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch. Dorothy had prepared a feast, and the ranch hands contributed whiskey and music. Someone had a fiddle, and someone else had a harmonica, and soon there was dancing in the yard. James was not much of a dancer, but he held Zara close and swayed with her, and that was enough. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, James led Zara away from the party. They walked hand in hand to the eastern edge of the property, where he had staked out the land for their future home. "This is where it will be," he said, gesturing to the flat area surrounded by cottonwood trees. "I have already started clearing the land. I will begin building next week." "It is perfect," Zara said, imagining the cabin that would stand here, the life they would build. "I know I promised you the world," James said, pulling her into his arms. "And all I have got to give you right now is this piece of land and my word that I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "Your word is enough," Zara said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "It has always been enough. You are enough, James. You are more than enough. You are everything." They made love for the first time that night in the small cabin that James had been living in with two other ranch hands who had graciously agreed to make themselves scarce. It was awkward and sweet and perfect, and afterward Zara lay in James's arms and felt utterly at peace. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" James asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "For seeing me that day, for helping me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for trusting me," James replied, "for taking a chance on a cowboy with nothing but his word." "Best decision I ever made," Zara said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The next few months were hard but happy. James worked long hours with the cattle and then spent every spare moment building their cabin. The other ranch hands helped when they could, and slowly but surely the structure took shape. Walls went up, a roof was added, windows were installed. Zara helped whenever she could, learning to handle tools and measurements, working beside her husband to create their home. Dorothy gave them a cast iron stove as a wedding gift, and one of the ranch hands built them a table and 2 chairs. Bit by bit, their little cabin filled with the necessities of life. It was not much, but it was theirs, and that made it beautiful. They moved in on a cold November day just before the first snow. The cabin was small, just one room with a sleeping loft, but it had a good fireplace and sturdy walls and a view of the mountains to the west. Zara hung curtains she had sewn herself and arranged their meager possessions with care. That night they sat by the fire and ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, and James said, "We did it. We built a home." "We did," Zara agreed, looking around at the cabin with pride. "It is perfect." "It is not much," James started to say, but Zara cut him off. "It is everything," she said firmly. "Stop apologizing for what we have. We built this together with our own hands. We have a roof over our heads and food on the table and each other. That is more than a lot of people can say." James pulled her into his lap and she went willingly, curling up against his chest. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured into her hair. "We both got lucky," Zara corrected. "The day we found each other. Winter settled in hard that year. The snow came early and heavy, and the work on the ranch became more difficult. James left before dawn each day to help with the cattle, making sure they had feed and breaking ice on the water troughs. He came home after dark, exhausted and frozen, and Zara would have hot food waiting and the cabin warm. They were poor by most standards, but they were rich in the ways that mattered. They had each other. They had their little home. They had hope for the future. One particularly brutal night in January, James came home later than usual, covered in snow and shivering. Zara helped him out of his wet clothes and wrapped him in a blanket by the fire, then made him drink hot coffee laced with a little whiskey Dorothy had given them. "2 of the calves were trapped in a snowdrift," he explained through chattering teeth. "Had to dig them out, nearly lost them." "But you saved them?" Zara asked, rubbing his cold hands between hers. "Yeah, got them back to the barn." He managed a tired smile. "Dorothy says I am getting a bonus this month for it." "That is wonderful," Zara said. "Maybe we can save it, start a little nest egg." James pulled her closer. "Actually, I was thinking we could use it to buy some chickens in the spring, start our own flock. Then you would have eggs to sell in town, make a little money of your own." Zara felt her heart swell. He was always thinking of ways to make their life better, to give her more. "That is a good idea." "And maybe," James said, his hand moving to rest on her stomach, "maybe we should start thinking about the future, about growing our family." Zara looked up at him in surprise. They had talked about children in abstract terms someday in the future, but this felt more immediate. "Are you sure?" "We do not have much. We have enough," James said. "We have love, we have a home, we have each other. That is enough to bring a child into, is it not?" "Yes," Zara said softly. "Yes, it is." 2 months later, in early March, Zara realized she was pregnant. She waited a few days to be sure, then told James one evening after supper. He was so overjoyed that he picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down and apologized, worried he had been too rough. "James," Zara laughed, "I am pregnant, not made of glass." But he was gentle with her after that, almost comically so. He would not let her lift anything heavy or work too hard. He brought her wildflowers and rubbed her feet in the evenings. When she started to show, he talked to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and the cattle and the wide Colorado sky. Dorothy was thrilled at the news and gave Zara lighter duties around the ranch house. The other cowboys teased James good-naturedly about becoming a father, but there was genuine happiness in their congratulations. As summer approached and Zara's belly grew round, James worked on expanding the cabin. He built a separate bedroom and a small addition that could serve as a nursery. It was hard work on top of his regular duties, but he never complained. He was building a future for his family, and that gave him purpose. One hot July evening, Zara was sitting on the porch trying to catch a breeze when a rider approached the cabin. Her blood ran cold when she recognized him. It was her stepfather. He looked worse than she remembered, thinner and meaner with wild eyes and unkempt hair. He was swaying in the saddle, clearly drunk. "There you are," he slurred, pointing an unsteady finger at her. "Thought you could run away from me, did you? Thought you could just disappear." Zara stood up, her hand protectively on her swollen belly. "You need to leave. You have no business here." "No business." He dismounted clumsily, nearly falling. "You are my daughter. You belong to me." "I am not your daughter. I never was. And I do not belong to anyone but myself." Zara backed toward the cabin door, wishing James was there. Her stepfather started toward her, rage twisting his features. "You ungrateful little—" He never finished the sentence. James appeared from the side of the cabin where he had been chopping wood. He stepped between Zara and her stepfather, his body a solid wall of protection. "That is far enough," James said, his voice deadly calm. "Who the hell are you?" her stepfather demanded. "I am her husband. And you need to get off my property. Now." "Your husband?" The older man laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "You married this little tramp. You do not know what you are getting. She is useless, just like her mother was." James's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained steady. "You have got 3 seconds to get back on that horse and ride out of here. If you do not, I will make you." "You think you scare me, boy." "I am not trying to scare you. I am telling you how it is. You will never speak to my wife again. You will never come near her again. And if I ever hear that you have been looking for her, I will find you and we will have a very different kind of conversation." James took a step forward. "Do you understand me?" Something in James's tone must have gotten through because her stepfather took a stumbling step backward. "She is not worth it," he muttered. "None of this is worth it." "Then leave," James said, "and do not come back." They watched as the older man hauled himself back onto his horse and rode away, zigzagging down the path. Zara was shaking, and James turned to gather her into his arms, careful of her belly. "It is all right," he murmured. "He is gone. You are safe." "He found me," Zara said, her voice breaking. "After all this time he found me, and I sent him away. He will not come back, Zara. He is a coward and a drunk, and he knows he cannot touch you anymore." James cupped her face in his hands. "I promised I would keep you safe, and I will, always." Zara believed him. She had always believed him. His word was enough. They never saw her stepfather again. Later, they heard through town gossip that he had gotten into a drunken brawl a few weeks after that confrontation and had been arrested. He died in jail that winter of pneumonia, and while Zara could not bring herself to feel sorry for him, she did feel relief. That chapter of her life was finally, truly closed. Their son was born in late September, a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray-green eyes. They named him Thomas, after James's father, and he was the most beautiful thing Zara had ever seen. James was a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby. He would walk the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, singing off-key lullabies. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving little horses into the wood. He talked to his son constantly, telling him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when Thomas was older. Life was not easy. Money was tight, and there were times when they had to make difficult choices about what they could afford. But they were happy. They had each other, they had their son, and they had their little home. When Thomas was 6 months old, Dorothy offered James a position as foreman of the ranch. It came with better pay and more responsibility, and James accepted gratefully. With the extra money, they were able to buy those chickens they had talked about, along with a milk cow and a few pigs. Slowly but surely, they were building something sustainable. Zara sold eggs and butter in town, and the extra income helped them save for the future. She dreamed of expanding the cabin again, adding a proper kitchen and maybe another bedroom for when Thomas grew older. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy full of energy and curiosity. He followed his father everywhere, learning about horses and cattle, learning the rhythms of ranch life. When Thomas was 3, Zara got pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, and she spent the last 2 months on bed rest. James was frantic with worry, barely leaving her side except when absolutely necessary. Dorothy brought meals and helped care for Thomas, and the other ranch hands took on extra duties without complaint. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny thing with Zara's dark hair and delicate features. They named her Sarah, and Thomas was immediately besotted with his baby sister. He wanted to hold her constantly, and would sing to her the same off-key lullabies his father had sung to him. With 2 children, the cabin felt small again. James started planning another expansion, but before he could begin, Dorothy made them an unexpected offer. "I am getting old," she said one evening over supper. "I will be 65 next month, and the truth is, I am tired. I have been thinking about what to do with this place when I am gone." "Miss Jensen," James started, but Dorothy held up a hand. "Let me finish. I have no children of my own, no family to speak of. This ranch has been my life, but I want to know it will go to someone who will care for it the way I have. Someone who knows the land and the work and what it takes to keep a place like this running." Zara felt her heart start to pound. She knew where this was going, but she was almost afraid to hope. "I want to sell you the ranch," Dorothy said, looking at James. "At a fair price, one you can pay off over time. You are already doing most of the management anyway. It makes sense." James looked stunned. "Miss Jensen, I do not know what to say. That is too generous." "It is not generosity, it is good business. You are the best foreman I have ever had. You know this place inside and out, and I trust you to take care of it." Dorothy's stern face softened into something almost maternal. "Besides, I have watched you 2 build a life here from nothing. You took a chance on each other when neither of you had anything to lose. You have worked harder than anyone I know. You deserve this." Zara reached over and took James's hand. "What do you think?" she asked softly. "I think," James said slowly, "I think we would be honored and grateful, more grateful than I can say." They worked out the details over the next few weeks. The price was fair, and Dorothy agreed to payments over 10 years. She would stay on at the ranch in a smaller cabin, helping when she felt up to it but mostly retired. James would take over as owner and manager. It felt like a dream. The scared young woman who had run through the streets of Greeley with nothing but the clothes on her back now owned a ranch. The cowboy who had offered nothing but his word now had land and livestock, and a future to pass on to his children. "You promised me the world," Zara said to James the night they signed the papers, lying in bed in what was now their house on their ranch. "And did I deliver?" James asked, pulling her close. "You gave me something better," Zara said. "You gave me a home. You gave me love. You gave me a family and a future. You kept every promise you ever made." "Your word was enough," she had told him that first day, and it had been. His word had been enough to start their whole life together. And every day since, he had proven that his word meant everything. They raised their children on that ranch, teaching them the value of hard work and the importance of keeping your promises. Thomas grew into a strong young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Sarah was clever and quick, with a head for numbers that made managing the ranch books easier. When Thomas was 15 and Sarah was 12, Zara got pregnant unexpectedly. She was 38 years old and the pregnancy was difficult, but their third child, a son they named Daniel, was born healthy and strong. Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 73. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch she had built with her own 2 hands, and Zara cried because this woman had given her a chance when she needed one most. The ranch prospered under James's management. He was fair with the hands, smart about the cattle, and always looking for ways to improve and expand. He never forgot what it was like to have nothing, and he was generous to those in need, often hiring drifters or men down on their luck, giving them the same chance Dorothy had given him. When the railroad expanded through their part of Colorado, James negotiated contracts to supply beef to the workers. The money from those contracts allowed them to buy more land, expand their herd, and hire more hands. They were no longer just getting by. They were thriving. But through it all, through the successes and the setbacks, through the good years and the hard winters, what mattered most to Zara was the man beside her. James kept every promise he had ever made. He loved her fiercely and faithfully. He worked hard every day to give their family a good life. And he never, not once, made her regret taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but his word. On their 20th wedding anniversary, James took Zara back to the creek where he had proposed. They walked hand in hand, older now but still in love, still committed to each other and to the life they had built. "You remember what I told you here?" James asked as they sat on the bank, their feet dangling in the cool water. "You told me you would love me with everything you had, for as long as you drew breath," Zara said. "You told me you would work hard every day to make a life for us." "And have I kept those promises?" James asked, though his tone suggested he knew the answer. "Every single one," Zara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You gave me more than you promised, James. You gave me everything." "You were the one who took the chance," James said. "You were the one who trusted me when you had no reason to. You could have told me to leave you alone that day in the alley. You could have said no when I asked you to marry me, but you did not. You said my word was enough." "It was," Zara said. "It is. It always will be." They sat by the creek as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and pink, and Zara thought about the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the frightened girl running through the streets of Greeley, the stranger who had offered his hand, the leap of faith that had changed everything. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all years do. Thomas married a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and they built a house on the northern edge of the ranch. Sarah fell in love with a schoolteacher who had come west from Boston, and after a whirlwind courtship, they married and settled in Greeley, where Sarah helped her husband establish a proper school for the growing town. Daniel, their youngest, showed an early aptitude for horses. By the time he was 16, he was the best horse trainer in 3 counties, and people came from all over to have him gentle their animals. He was quieter than his siblings, more introspective, but he had his father's steady nature and his mother's kind heart. Grandchildren began to arrive, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Thomas and his wife had 4 children in quick succession, keeping everyone busy. Sarah had twins, a boy and a girl, who visited the ranch every summer and ran wild with their cousins. James taught his grandchildren to ride, just as he had taught his own children. He told them stories about building the ranch, about their grandmother's courage, about the importance of hard work and integrity. He was patient with them, loving, the kind of grandfather who always had time for one more story or one more ride. Zara watched her husband with their grandchildren and fell in love with him all over again. He had kept every promise. He had built them a world, not with money or grand gestures, but with steady, faithful love and countless small actions that added up to a lifetime of devotion. When James was 52, he was thrown from a particularly ornery horse and broke his leg badly. The doctor said it, but it never healed quite right, and afterward James walked with a slight limp. He could not ride as much as he used to, could not work the long hours he once had, but he adapted. He taught Daniel more about managing the ranch, preparing his youngest son to eventually take over. He spent more time with the bookkeeping, the business side of ranching. And he spent more time with Zara, which neither of them minded at all. They were in their 60s when the great blizzard hit, a storm that people would talk about for decades afterward. It came in March when everyone thought winter was over, and it buried the ranch in 6 feet of snow. They lost some cattle, and the damage to the buildings was significant, but they survived. The whole family worked together to dig out, to repair, to recover. It reminded Zara of those early years, when it was just her and James against the world, working together to build something from nothing. Dorothy's old cabin, where Zara and James had spent their first years, was damaged beyond repair in that storm. They tore it down that spring, salvaging what wood they could. Zara felt a pang of sadness watching it come down, remembering all the nights she had spent there with James, planning their future, dreaming their dreams. "Do not be sad," James said, putting his arm around her as they watched the last wall fall. "That cabin served its purpose. It gave us shelter when we needed it, but we have outgrown it. We have built something bigger and better." "I know," Zara said, "but it was where we started. It was our first home." "Our first home was each other," James corrected. "The place did not matter, it was us. It was always us." He was right, of course. He was always right about the things that mattered. Thomas took over more and more of the day-to-day management of the ranch as James slowed down. He was a good manager, fair and smart like his father, and the ranch continued to prosper under his leadership. James was proud of his son, proud of all his children and the people they had become. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and yard, and there was a feast that lasted all afternoon. Sarah had written a song for her parents, and she stood up after dinner and sang it, her clear voice carrying over the assembled family. It was about a cowboy and a girl who had nothing, who built a life on promises and faith and love. It was about hard work and perseverance and the beauty of choosing each other every day. By the time Sarah finished, there was not a dry eye in the house. James pulled Zara to her feet and held her close, swaying to music only they could hear. 40 years, he said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. 40 years of keeping your promises, Zara said, looking up at him. His hair was gray now, and there were deep lines around his eyes, but to her, he was still the young cowboy who had offered his hand in that alley. 40 years of you saying yes, James countered. I could not have done any of this without you, Zara. You were the one who believed in me when I had nothing to offer but my word. Your word was enough, Zara said for what must have been the 1,000th time. It has always been enough. They danced in the middle of their family, surrounded by the people they had created and the life they had built, and Zara thought that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfection, not wealth, not ease, just love, just faithfulness. Just two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other, day after day, year after year. James lived to be 73 years old. He died in his sleep on a cool autumn night, with Zara beside him as she had been for 50 years. His last words to her, spoken earlier that evening, were, "I kept my promises." "You did," Zara had assured him, holding his hand. "You kept every single one." The funeral was huge. It seemed like everyone in the county came to pay their respects to James Barrett, the cowboy who had built a ranch, raised a family, and lived his life with integrity and honor. They told stories about his fairness, his hard work, his generosity. They talked about how he had given drifters a chance, how he had helped neighbors in hard times, how he had always kept his word. Zara stood at his grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and felt the loss like a physical wound. But she also felt grateful. 50 years. They had been given 50 years together. That was more than many people got, and they had made the most of every single day. She stayed on the ranch, of course. She could not imagine living anywhere else. This land held all her memories, all her history. She helped Thomas and his wife manage the household, played with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and spent quiet evenings on the porch watching the sun set over the land James had loved. Daniel, who had never married, lived with her and took care of her. He was 45 now, still the quiet one, still the best horseman anyone knew. He made sure she had everything she needed and sat with her in the evenings while she told stories about his father. "Tell me again," he would say, "about how you met." And Zara would tell him about running through the streets of Greeley, about the stranger in the alley who had offered his hand and his word, about the leap of faith that had started everything. She never tired of telling the story because it never stopped amazing her. Out of fear and desperation and chance, something beautiful had grown. Zara lived to be 86 years old. In her final years, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family, all of them thriving, all of them carrying forward the values she and James had instilled. The ranch was still successful, still providing a livelihood for dozens of people. The Barrett name was respected throughout Colorado. On her last day, Zara sat on the porch of the house James had built for her all those years ago. She could see the mountains to the west, painted gold by the setting sun. She could hear the lowing of cattle and the sound of her great-grandchildren playing in the yard. Everything was exactly as it should be. Daniel came and sat beside her, taking her hand. "How are you feeling, Mama?" "Tired," Zara admitted, "but content, so very content." "You need anything?" Zara shook her head. "I have everything I need. I always did from the moment your father offered me his hand." "He loved you so much," Daniel said. "I know, and I loved him. I love him still." Zara squeezed her son's hand. "He kept his promises, Daniel, every single one. That is what I want you all to remember. That is the legacy I want you to carry forward. Keep your word, honor your commitments, love with your whole heart. That is what matters. That is what lasts." "We will, Mama." "I promise." "Good," Zara said. "That is good." She closed her eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch, feeling the warm evening breeze on her face. She thought about James, about the life they had shared, about all the moments of joy and struggle and love that had filled their years together. He had promised her the world with nothing but his word, and she had told him his word was enough. It had been. It had been more than enough. It had been everything. Zara Fitzgerald Barrett died peacefully that evening, surrounded by love, secure in the knowledge that she had lived a good life with a good man. They buried her next to James on the hill overlooking the ranch. Their graves side by side under the vast Colorado sky they had both loved. Their story became part of the family history, passed down through generations. Great-grandchildren who never knew them still heard about the cowboy who promised the world with nothing but his word. and the brave woman who said his word was enough. They heard about the leap of faith that started it all, about the hard work and dedication that built a legacy, about the power of keeping promises and loving faithfully. The ranch continued to thrive, passing from Thomas to his children and then to their children. But it was always the Barrett Ranch, named for the cowboy and his wife who had started it all with nothing but hope in each other. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Colorado mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and amber, the family would gather on the porch and remember. They would remember that love was not about what you had to give, but about the commitment you made. They would remember that a promise meant everything, that a word given should be a word kept. They would remember James and Zara and the beautiful life they had built on nothing but trust and faith and love, because in the end, that was enough. It had always been enough. His word, her faith, and their love. That was the foundation that built everything else. That was the legacy that lasted long after they were gone. That was the truth that echoed through the generations, a reminder that sometimes the most important promises are not about what you can give, but about who you will be. James Barrett had offered his word, and Zara Fitzgerald had said it was enough. And together, they had proved that sometimes that is all you need. The rest is just time and work and the choice to keep loving, keep trusting, keep believing in each other no matter what comes. Their story ended the way all good love stories should, not with drama or tragedy, but with a life well lived, a love well chosen, and a legacy that would endure. They had found each other in the worst of circumstances and had built the best of lives. They had proved that love was not about perfect conditions or unlimited resources, but about unwavering commitment and faithful hearts. The Wild West was not an easy place. It was harsh and unforgiving, full of danger and hardship. But it was also a place where people could start over, where they could build something from nothing, where a cowboy could promise the world with nothing but his word, and make good on that promise through sheer determination and love. James and Zara's story was one of thousands that played out across the American frontier. But to their family, to the people who came after them, it was the most important story of all. It was the story of where they came from, of the courage and love that made their lives possible. It was a reminder that the best things in life are not given, but built, day by day, choice by choice, promise by promise. And so the Barrett Ranch stood for over a century, a testament to what two people could build when they truly believed in each other. The original cabin James built was long gone, but the main house remained, expanded and modernized over the years, but still fundamentally the same structure that had sheltered their growing family. Visitors to the ranch could still see James and Zara's graves on the hill, could still stand in the place where their story began, and marvel at what had grown from such humble beginnings. And if they were lucky, if they came at the right time, they could hear the current generation of Barretts tell the story of their ancestors, the cowboy and the runaway girl who had built an empire on nothing but trust and love, because that was the real treasure they left behind. Not the land, not the cattle, not the money. The real treasure was the story, the lesson, the reminder that a word given in good faith and accepted in trust could be the foundation for something beautiful and lasting. That was the inheritance that mattered, the legacy that endured. James had promised Zara the world with nothing but his word. She had said his word was enough. And together, they had proved that sometimes the greatest riches are not measured in gold or silver, but in promises kept and love freely given. That was the truth at the heart of their story. That was the message that echoed through the years, as relevant for future generations as it had been for them. In the end, that was what mattered. Not where you started, but where you ended up. Not what you had, but what you built. Not the promises made in moments of passion, but the promises kept through years of ordinary days. James and Zara understood that, lived it, proved it. And that made their story not just a love story, but a lesson in how to live a life of meaning and purpose. The Wild West might have been tamed, the frontier might have closed, but the values James and Zara embodied remained timeless. Keep your word. Work hard. Love faithfully. Build something lasting. Those were the principles that guided their lives and the lives of those who came after them. Those were the truths that made their story worth telling and retelling, generation after generation. And so it was that a moment of chance in an alley in Greeley, Colorado, in the summer of 1878, became the beginning of a legacy that would last for over a century. A frightened young woman. A compassionate cowboy. A promise made. A promise kept. And a lifetime of love built on the simple but profound truth that sometimes a person's word really is enough.